Theo doesn't notice it happening. That's the whole point. He's reasonably careful with money. He tracks the big things, the rent, the car payment, the utilities. He knows approximately what comes in each month and approximately where most of it goes. He is not reckless. He is not living beyond his means in any obvious way. And yet, when he finally sits down on a Sunday in February with his bank statements printed out across the kitchen table, something doesn't add up. The number that should be there isn't. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, just quietly, persistently, month after month, a few $100s short of where it should land. This is how the drain works. Not a flood, not a rupture. Just a slow, steady leak in the floor you never thought to check. The reason most people miss it isn't carelessness. It's architecture. The money that leaves your account this way is designed to leave without resistance. No invoice arrives. No decision gets made. Nothing triggers that small alarm in the back of your head that says, "Wait, do I actually want this?" The charge just appears and disappears from your balance, and life continues, and you are slightly, invisibly poorer than you were before. Theo pulls up his February statement. He starts counting subscriptions. The streaming service he uses most nights. Another one he signed up for during a free trial in October. A fitness app he downloaded with genuine intention in January. A cloud storage plan that auto-renewed when his phone ran out of space 2 years ago. A password manager. A meditation platform someone recommended at a work event. A meal planning service he used 3 times. He counts 14 recurring charges. He estimated 8. The difference between what he thought he was spending on subscriptions and what he was actually spending is $194 a month. Not a small number. Not an emergency. Just gone. Quietly, automatically, every single month. Here is what $194 a month actually means. It's $2,328 a year. It's roughly $11,600 over 5 years, and that's before you apply any rate of return at all. Put that $194 into something earning even a modest annual return instead of feeding it to services you've forgotten you own, and the math becomes quietly devastating. The subscriptions themselves aren't the problem. Some of them are worth every cent. The problem is the ones you're paying for that you no longer use, no longer remember, and would cancel without hesitation if the decision ever crossed your mind again. It never does. That's the design. The subscription economy is built around a single psychological truth. Small charges don't feel like decisions. $14.99 disappears from an account without triggering anything. You don't weigh it against anything else. You don't think about what else that money could become. The charge clears and your brain files it under background noise. And the companies that sell you these subscriptions know this. The free trial exists to get you past the decision point. Once your card is on file and the billing starts, inertia handles the rest. You'd have to actively stop it. Most people don't. There's a particular genius to the pricing strategy. Services cost $9.99 or $14.99 specifically because those numbers sit just below the threshold where they register as real money. You won't notice $14.99 leaving your account. If it were $20, you might. The exact positioning matters. There's also the stacking effect. A single subscription for $14.99 doesn't feel like anything. 3 subscriptions don't feel like much either. But 14 of them, which is somehow how most people end up, suddenly constitute real money. By that point, though, they're scattered across different billing dates, different companies, different parts of the statement. You never see them together. The architecture ensures you never make the comparison that would shock you into action. A data science analyst at a major tech company explained once that their job is to find the price point at which users stop noticing, but revenue stops declining. Most of them find it somewhere between $9.99 and $19.99. That range isn't arbitrary. It's calculated. It's the zone of invisibility. Theo cancels 6 of the 14. It takes him about 25 minutes. He gets a little money back on 2 of them. The 6 he cancels were costing him $91 a month. Just those 6. Gone now. Not because he was irresponsible. Not because he wasn't smart enough to see it. Just because nobody made him look. He sits with that for a minute. $91 a month, for how long? He doesn't do the math on that. He doesn't want to. But subscriptions aren't the only drain. Not even close. The next column on Theo's statement is harder to look at because it doesn't have a category. It's just a long scroll of small numbers. Coffee, 3 times last week. Vending machine on Tuesday. Convenience store on Thursday night because he didn't feel like cooking and needed something to get through the evening. A lunch he bought because he forgot to bring what he planned to bring. Another lunch the next day for the same reason. None of these are significant individually. Added together across the month, Theo spent $218 on unplanned food and convenience purchases. He does not remember most of them. A recent Slick Deals survey found that Americans spend an average of $151 a month on impulse buys. Theo is above average. What's interesting isn't the number itself. What's interesting is that Theo would tell you with full confidence and no guile that he doesn't really impulse buy. He's careful. He thinks about his purchases. He waited 3 weeks before buying a new jacket last fall. He is not wrong about himself in general. He's just not looking at the right thing. The small purchases don't register as purchases. They register as moments. A coffee on the way to a meeting. Something to get through the afternoon. The convenience of not having to plan. Those aren't spending categories in his mind. They're just life happening. There's a psychological mechanism at work here that retailers understand better than anyone. When spending happens in isolation, it doesn't trigger the same mental accounting as when you see it grouped together. Theo buys a coffee for $5.50 and doesn't think of it as spending. He buys a vending machine snack for $3.25 and doesn't think of it as spending. But if someone told him he spent $8.75 on items he forgot about within the hour, that would register differently. The brain would categorize it as waste. But because each transaction happens separately throughout the day, across different locations and contexts, they bypass the mental barrier that would normally prevent them. This is why coffee shops are busy at 8 in the morning, but people consistently claim to save money. They're not lying. They're just not adding up what those moments actually cost. The apps have made it worse. There's a service Theo uses to order food for delivery. There's another one for getting to the airport. A third for renting tools he uses twice a year. Each app is frictionless. Open, tap, pay. Your card is already on file. You don't have to look at the total until after you've committed. You don't have to think about it at all, really. The transaction happens in seconds. And because the phone is intermediary between you and the money, it feels less real. Less like spending, more like convenience happening. Studies on digital spending versus cash spending show that people spend dramatically more when they're not handling physical currency. The abstraction creates distance. Distance creates spending. This is the part nobody talks about. The friction that used to protect people from overspending has been systematically removed. A tap of your phone, a click at checkout, a one-touch order from an app that already has your address. The moment spending becomes frictionless, every purchase is equally easy, which means the small, forgettable ones blend into the same motion as the considered deliberate ones. You stop noticing the difference. The drain opens a little wider. Then there are the fees. Theo has 2 credit cards and a checking account. He uses them normally. He pays most of his bills on time. But in February, he missed his payment due date on one card by 4 days because he was traveling and it slipped. $35 late fee. He also used an out-of-network ATM twice last month. Combined fee both times was $9.28. Small, forgettable, and still just gone. The average overdraft fee in 2026 is $32.75. The average out-of-network ATM transaction costs $4.64 when you combine both sides of the charge. These numbers are not designed to be noticed. They're designed to be absorbed. Most people absorb them. Banks have become sophisticated about fee collection. They know that a single $35 charge won't trigger much reaction. But they also know that if they charged for every interaction, people would be outraged. So the fees are carefully scattered. One here for being slightly late, another there for using the wrong machine, a third for not maintaining a minimum balance. Together they create a tax on the people least able to pay it. A wealthy person with substantial savings never pays a late fee because the money is always there. A person living paycheck to paycheck pays them regularly. The fee structure, in this way, functions as an invisible wealth transfer from those who need to keep money most to those who need it least. Theo is in the middle somewhere. Not wealthy, but stable enough that fees are occasional rather than systematic. But they still, surprise him. They still sting a little. What Theo has been doing, without quite intending to, is paying a quiet ongoing tax on disorganization. Not a large one, not a ruinous one, just a consistent one. The late fee because the due date wasn't marked. The ATM charge because the in-network branch was 3 more blocks. The convenience purchase because the lunch wasn't prepped. Each of these is a small failure of system, not character. Theo isn't bad with money, he just doesn't have the infrastructure to stop money from leaving quietly. There's a difference. Understanding the difference is where things start to change. The third column is the uncomfortable one. Theo's income went up last year. Not dramatically. His salary increased by about $6,000 annually, which lands as roughly $400 more per month after tax. He remembers thinking, when that happened, that he'd barely notice it. He figured it would go straight to savings. He didn't set up an automatic transfer, he didn't make any actual decision about where that money would go, and it didn't go to savings. It dissolved into a slightly nicer version of the same life he was already living. A dinner out instead of in, a hotel upgrade that was only $20 more, a grocery cart that somehow totals $30 higher than it did a year ago for no clear reason. This is lifestyle creep. And unlike subscriptions or convenience spending, it doesn't leave a clean paper trail. It just expands the baseline. The baseline is what makes it dangerous. Because once spending rises to meet income, any disruption to the income becomes a crisis. A person spending at the ceiling of what they earn has no margin, no buffer, no quiet reserve sitting somewhere doing something. They have a lifestyle that requires exactly as much as it costs, month after month with no slack in the line. The mechanism of lifestyle creep is worth understanding because it's how people earning good salaries end up feeling perpetually short on money. When you get a raise, there's usually no conscious decision about where it goes. It doesn't land in a savings account. It lands in your checking account, and the baseline of what life costs simply adjusts upward to match. This happens because there's no friction to having a better version of things. The apartment you have is fine, but the slightly nicer one is only 10% more expensive. The car you have works, but the upgraded model is only $150 more per month. The restaurants you go to are good, but the ones in the nicer neighborhood have the same prices, just better ambiance. None of these decisions feel like an indulgence. Each one feels like a reasonable upgrade in proportion to earning slightly more, but they compound, they accumulate, and they lock you into a spending level that leaves no room for anything to go wrong. Millionaires think in terms of total cost of ownership. People who feel perpetually short on money think in terms of whether the monthly payment is manageable. One of those frameworks builds things. The other just keeps the lights on. Theo has been operating mostly in the second mode without realizing it. Not because he's not smart. Because nobody ever made the distinction visible to him. His grocery situation is its own small disaster. He goes to the store on Saturday. He buys everything he plans to make that week. By Thursday, the produce drawer has turned into a small museum of good intentions. The average American family throws away $1,600 worth of food per year. Theo probably clears that alone. The bunch of kale that seemed like a reasonable idea, the Greek yogurt he bought 6 of because it was on sale and then forgot about, the rotisserie chicken he fully intended to do something interesting with, all of it exits the refrigerator and enters the trash without ever doing anything useful. This is money. Physical, actual money in a bin. He's not wasteful by temperament. He's just not planning, which means he's buying food he doesn't need because it looked good, and throwing away food he bought but didn't plan around, and filling the gap with convenience purchases when the fridge looks empty mid-week, even though it's actually full of things he bought and forgot. The whole cycle costs him somewhere between $100 and $150 a month more than it would if he just had a list and stuck to it. That number sounds boring. Over 10 years, it's between $12,000 and $18,000. It doesn't sound boring anymore. Here's what all of these things have in common. None of them feel like a problem when they're happening. That is not an accident. The subscription you forget, the late fee you absorb, the upgraded dinner that feels like a reasonable treat, the groceries that don't quite get used. Each one arrives quietly and departs the same way. No alarm, no moment of reckoning, just the slow, persistent erosion of money you earned and intended to keep. This is the architecture of the drain, not one leak, many small ones all running at the same time in the background, while you're busy doing everything else. Theo puts the statements back in a folder. He does some math. Subscriptions he can cancel. $91 a month. Convenience and impulse purchases he can reasonably reduce by half, maybe $110 a month. Banking fees he can eliminate entirely with 30 minutes of setup, $44. Grocery waste he can cut with a basic meal plan, $120. He's looking at somewhere between $350 and $365 a month. That's $4,380 a year. That's money he earned. Money that passed through his hands without building anything, without going anywhere, without becoming anything at all. He doesn't feel dramatic about it, he just feels the weight of it. $4,000 a year, conservatively, invested at a reasonable return over 20 years. The number you get from that calculation is not a number you want to think about too long if you've spent the last decade letting it drain. He doesn't dwell on the past. He looks at the current statement, closes the folder, and opens a spreadsheet. The fix is not complicated. It's just inconvenient, which is why most people don't do it. You do a subscription audit. You go through every line on your bank and credit card statement, every single recurring charge, and you ask one question. Would you sign up for this today, at this price? Not whether you might use it eventually, not whether it was useful once. Today, at this price, would you choose it? The ones where the answer is anything other than a clear yes. You cancel. Not later. Today. You automate your actual savings before anything else has a chance to reach them. The money that doesn't sit in your checking account waiting to be spent doesn't get spent. It moves on the day your paycheck lands, somewhere with a purpose. Even a small amount on autopilot beats a large amount left in the open to dissolve. You set up alerts for your credit card due dates. You keep one in-network bank card in your wallet. You write a grocery list on Saturday morning before you go to the store and you don't buy what isn't on it. These are not profound strategies. They're just systems. The drain doesn't close because of discipline. It closes because you remove the gaps the money was slipping through. The interesting thing about Theo is what happens about 6 months after that February Sunday. He's not wealthy. He hasn't made any dramatic changes. He drives the same car. He lives in the same apartment. His life looks identical from the outside. But there's $2,100 sitting in an account that would have been gone by now. Not spent on anything consequential. Not lost to any single bad decision. Just accumulated quietly from the space that opened up when he stopped letting the small things drain out unchecked. He doesn't talk about it. There's nothing visible to show for it yet. But the architecture has changed. And the thing about architecture is that it either works for you or against you, whether you're paying attention or not. 2 months after that, Theo's company has a round of layoffs. Not a big wave. 7 people across his department. His role is fine. But his colleague Marcus, who made slightly more, who had the nicer apartment, who traded up his car last spring, comes into the office looking pale in a way that has nothing to do with the news itself. What Theo notices isn't the layoff. What he notices is that Marcus is 3 months from his margin, that the fear in his face isn't about the job. It's about the gap between what he earns and what his life costs. That gap is exactly where the drain lives.